but twisting it as they go up for another quarter clover leaf. Russ Eatwell started his display flying experience really while he was in the Royal Navy. His final flying role in the Fleet Air Arm was to command the Navy's Fixed Wing Standards Organisation. He displayed the Sea Harrier, also the Fairy Swordfish we'll be seeing later, and the Hawker Seahawk. Started flying the Rolls-Royce Spitfire at air shows as well. He's flown several other Spitfires. He's now an instructor on the Hawk T2 at RAF Valley. The main formation now in with the soloist rolling around their smoke. For a fly past they call a cyclone. And being chased down by Ravens 4 and 5. And they'll be rejoining back into Delta formation. Raven 2 is another very well-known name on the air show circuit, Peter Wells. He decided to specialise in aircraft engineering. He runs a company called Zulu Glass Tech based in Oxfordshire, which is very expert in composite aircraft maintenance as well as sales. He started powered flying as a glider target pilot, another very good way, rather like parachute dropping, to build up your hours. Then moving on to aerobatic aircraft. Most famously, he built a very attractive silent twister aeroplane and started displaying it. We used to see the Twister duo regularly at Duxford. He joined Team Raven in 2022. Bringing the formation then back in on the B-axis straight towards us in Delta formation. Gradually, gently rolling out. Pulling up in unison. And this is for the vertical split. Ravens 4 and 5 breaking away first. Raven 6 going vertical. And the other 3 fanning out beautifully. At either end of the crowd line, Ravens 4 and 5 perform half-cubanate manoeuvres. Now if you look out there towards the M11 end, over towards Duxford Village, you can see all 6 aircraft are getting back together now for a really, really attractive manoeuvre as they come past us next time. And this is B-17 Sally B, backtracks down the main runway. They're rejoining into big echelon formation. And rolling behind it, Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B. This is all the start of the main body of displays today. Over 3:30 hours that morning. The Air Force fighters were over their patrol areas just over an hour later. P-51 Mustangs like the one we just saw taking off, along with P-47 Thunderbolts, one of which we'll see later, were involved in providing a screen for the invasion forces. They fly on. And here we begin our tribute to the activities of the US 8th Air Force on D-Day 80 years ago, running in B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B and the Mustang Jersey Jerk. movement of German reserves. But this, of course, Colin, was just part, wasn't it, of the enormous effort made by the 8th Air Force from East Anglia with aircraft such as this, crucially, in daylight.
Yeah, this was the big thing, the B-17s, so-called flying fortresses, heavily armed. The thinking was that they would be able to defend themselves over the skies of Europe. As it turned out, that proved to be not the case, and it was with the eventual arrival of the P-51 Mustang that the losses were curtailed, and the operations of the B-17s that at one time were threatened, in fact, because of the losses were so substantial over Europe. The consideration was given to actually cancelling daylight bombing and going to nighttime bombing. However, the general persisted with that theory of precision bombing, and with the assistance of particularly the P-51, B-17 dominated the sky, and the Mustang, of course, dominated the skies over Europe, in fact.
Yes, and for both the crews of the B-17s and the B-24 Liberators, one of which you can see in the American Air Museum here, they were at altitude in very cold conditions. Personal protective equipment was at a premium, and the risk was, of course, from both flak and fighters.
Yeah, in fact, you talk about the cold, we're talking about minus 50 degrees. The waist gunners would stand in open doorways, effectively, with the 50 caliber machine guns, and with the wind chill factor, it wasn't unusual for those crew to suffer severe frostbite. So they had to contend with terrible conditions from a weather perspective, as well as the onslaught of the flak and the fighters of the Luftwaffe to attack German-occupied Europe. We should also mention, of course, that the B-17s were operated by the RAF, and they didn't perform particularly well in the bomber role. However, they were used quite successfully in the anti-submarine war in the Atlantic.
They were, and again alongside the Liberators in that VLR, very long-range role.
We should mention, of course, that Sally B also still to this day carries the markings of the Memphis Belle. The original aircraft flew from just down the road from Duxford, from Bassingbourn.
It did, famously being the first B-17 credited with completing 25 combat missions. Actually, it was the 4th 8th Air Force heavy bomber to reach that milestone, but its crew, which was headed by Captain Robert Morgan, actually completed 29 sorties. Again, an incredible achievement, and this was, of course, the aircraft that was featured in the William Wyler wartime documentary of that name. This aeroplane privately operated from Duxford, as it has been since, would you believe, 1975. So next year is a very big year for this aircraft. It'll be 80 years since this airframe was first built by the Lockheed Vega factory in Burbank, California, and it'll be 50 years of operation on the UK and European airshow circuit. It's now the only flying B-17 in Europe. I believe it's currently one of only 2 flying in the world. This is its final pass, and this is, as always, dedicated to the members of the Sally B Supporters Club, with smoke on to depict 2 damaged engines. We salute the Sally B Supporters Club members and their efforts to help keep this aircraft flying. And of course, we have to mention Ellie's This was the aircraft of Captain Donald Strait, when he was the commanding officer of the 361st Fighter Group, 8th Air Force, stationed at Martlesham Heath, near Ipswich. He'd started in combat flying P-47 Thunderbolts and named all his aircraft Jersey Jerk. He came from New Jersey. He'd wanted to use the name Jersey Bounce, but that had already been taken. Commanding officer, Strait ended the war with 13.5 enemy aircraft kills to his name, and he later became a regular visitor to Duxford because he was a great supporter of the American Air Museum project in its early days. And so it's very appropriate to see him saluted by this beautifully finished P-51. And there is overflow Clarence E. Bud Anderson, the last surviving US Army Air Force's triple ace of World War II, who died recently, aged 102. We were last privileged to welcome Bud to Duxford for an air show in May 2013, when we were marking the 70th anniversary of the arrival here of the US 8th Air Force. He watched the Eagle Squadron formation of flight flown by American pilots in the European theatre. His presence pretty much right up until his recent death was always hugely welcomed. He was one of the finest combat exponents of the P-51, and we recall him as well as we watch this one fly. Alex Smee landing after a beautiful display of Mustang Jersey Jerk. But now it's to some international guests that we turn for our next display item. An exquisite collection of historic aircraft sponsored by Red Bull in Austria, known as the Flying Bulls. And joining us for this weekend from their base at Salzburg Airport, where they enjoy facilities unmatched by pretty much any other historic aircraft operator I can think of, in the amazing Hangar 7 complex, running in from the